When the avoidant finally feels, it's already too late. Let me ask you something straight up. How long have you been running? Not physically. I'm not talking about a treadmill or a marathon. I mean emotionally, spiritually, from connection, from vulnerability, from yourself. You see, the avoidant doesn't know they're avoiding. They think they're protecting. They call it independence, strength, logic, but it's fear. Fear of being seen, fear of being hurt, fear of being real. And so they push people away, they stay busy, they stay unavailable. And one by one, they kill every chance at love, intimacy, and joy without ever knowing they were doing it. But here's the catch. Eventually something cracks, something breaks through the armor. A touch, a word, a moment, a goodbye they didn't expect. And the feelings flood in. Unstoppable, undeniable, too damn late. That's when the avoidant finally feels. But the room is empty, the voice is gone, the bridge is burned, and the silence is loud enough to shatter every lie they ever told themselves. Let this be the wake-up call, because healing doesn't start after the damage. It starts now. It starts when you choose to feel, to show up messy, scared, uncertain, and still present. Don't wait until it's too late to say the words, to stay in the room. Stop running. You're not made to be alone. You're made to be alive. Avoidance is not strength. It's unprocessed fear in disguise. When you think about the word avoidant, you might picture someone who's tough, independent, and self-sufficient. Someone who doesn't need anyone else, who can weather storms alone. You might even think of this person as having their life together. Someone who's figured out how to navigate the chaos of emotions and relationships by simply not engaging with them. It looks like strength from the outside, right? But the truth is, avoidance is a defense mechanism that doesn't protect you. It isolates you. The avoidant mindset operates under the false belief that distancing yourself from emotional vulnerability is a sign of strength, when in reality it's often the result of fear. Fear of being judged, fear of rejection, and even fear of being overwhelmed by your own emotions. Instead of facing the discomfort of emotional engagement, the avoidant shuts it out. But what's happening underneath the surface is far from strength. It's a form of self-protection, yes, but it's a protection built on shaky ground, a defense against an enemy that hasn't even fully been identified yet. The enemy of pain, of exposure, of real connection. Here's the thing, emotional vulnerability is one of the most powerful forces of human connection. It's what binds us together, what creates deep, meaningful relationships. But vulnerability is also messy. It's unpredictable. It leaves us open to the possibility of hurt, and that's where the avoidant individual feels the most threatened. They don't want to face that rawness, that uncertainty. Instead, they choose to push away before they can be pushed away. They create barriers around themselves, telling themselves that they are fine on their own, that they don't need anyone else to be whole. But at the heart of this avoidance lies a simple truth. They don't know how to process their own emotions. When they feel overwhelmed by feelings they can't control, they run, they withdraw, they shut down. They believe that if they can keep everyone and everything at a distance, they'll never have to face the uncomfortable emotions that come with real connection. They might even convince themselves that their independence is a badge of honor, a symbol of how self-sufficient they are, but the reality is, it's not independence, it's isolation. And isolation, while it might feel safe in the short term, creates an emotional void that only grows bigger over time. The more they avoid feeling, the less they are able to understand themselves, the less they can connect with others, and ultimately, the more they deny themselves the richness of life's most fulfilling experiences. People who avoid emotional connection often tell themselves that they don't need others to be happy. They say, I'm fine on my own, or I don't need anyone to complete me, but deep down is a part of them that knows the truth. That connection is not just a luxury, but a fundamental human need. No one is meant to go through life completely alone. No one is meant to avoid feeling, to shut down their emotions in order to maintain a sense of control. That control is an illusion, a fragile defense against a world that demands emotional engagement. What the avoidant person may not realize is that every time they push away, they're also pushing away a part of themselves. They're cutting themselves off from the opportunity to grow emotionally, to learn, to stretch past their comfort zone. Each time they avoid a difficult conversation or shut down when emotions surface, they're building an emotional wall that gets higher and stronger over time. Eventually, this wall becomes so thick that it's hard to even see over it, let alone break it down. It's important to understand that the avoidance isn't a conscious choice to push others away. It's a subconscious reaction to unresolved fear. The avoidant individual isn't necessarily trying to hurt the people around them, but they're inadvertently doing so by keeping everyone at arm's length. And in doing so, they deprive themselves of the chance to experience the deep, raw connection that makes life truly meaningful. When you avoid feeling, you also avoid the chance to heal. You avoid the possibility of building stronger relationships. You avoid learning how to trust yourself and others. You avoid experiencing the fullness of life's highs and lows. Yes, vulnerability can be scary. Yes, it opens you up to potential pain, but it also opens you up to love, to growth, and to the kind of emotional depth that gives life its richness and meaning. Avoidance is not strength, it's simply fear in disguise. It's fear of being seen for who you truly are, fear of being rejected, fear of being hurt. But the irony is that the longer you avoid these feelings, the more they pile up and manifest in ways that are harder to manage. At some point, you can no longer run from them. At some point, the walls you've built will come crashing down and you'll be left facing everything you've been avoiding all along. True strength doesn't lie in avoiding vulnerability. True strength lies in facing your fear, allowing yourself to feel, and choosing to grow through the discomfort. True strength lies in showing up as your authentic self, even when it feels scary. Because when you allow yourself to feel, you unlock the full potential of what it means to be human. You begin to connect with others on a level that goes beyond surface interactions, and ultimately you discover a deeper sense of freedom because you're no longer chained to the fear of feeling. Connection demands risk. And that's what the avoidant mind resists. At the core of human existence is our need to connect, to bond, to be seen and understood by others. It's a basic truth of being human. Yet for those who struggle with avoidant tendencies, this connection becomes a high-stakes game, one in which the emotional vulnerability required to build real relationships feels like an unbearable risk. They fear what might happen if they allow someone to truly see them. Fear that once they open up, the person on the other side might judge them, reject them, or worse, use their vulnerability against them. At the heart of this avoidance is the fear of emotional exposure. Emotional vulnerability feels like an open invitation for hurt, betrayal, or disappointment. The avoidant person often believes that keeping others at a distance is the only way to protect themselves from the potential pain of being too open, too real, too human. So instead of embracing the discomfort that comes with opening up, they retreat, creating walls around their heart and mind. And these walls might not always be physical, they might be emotional or psychological, but they're no less effective at keeping people away. The avoidant person often tells themselves that they don't need anyone else to be happy. They find solace in their independence, in their self-sufficiency, and in their ability to stand alone. But the reality is this emotional armor they've built up over time is not only keeping others at base. It's also keeping them from fully experiencing the richness that life has to offer. The kind of connection that leads to true fulfillment doesn't come without risk. To truly be seen by someone else, to be loved for who you are, flaws and all, requires a level of openness and trust that many avoidants simply cannot allow themselves to give. Avoidants often rationalize their fear of connection by convincing themselves that it's better to keep things shallow, to stay in control of their emotions, and to avoid getting too involved. They tell themselves that they're protecting their heart, that they're keeping things simple, that they're better off keeping their distance. But what they're missing is that real connection doesn't just happen on the surface. True intimacy, the kind of connection that brings deep fulfillment, requires a willingness to be vulnerable, to show up in the mess of being human, and to share your fears, your desires, and your insecurities with someone else. The avoidant mind is constantly at odds with this truth. On one hand, it craves connection. It craves a sense of belonging, the warmth that comes from being close to another person. But on the other hand, it fears the vulnerability that comes with true connection. The avoidant person knows, deep down, that opening up to someone means exposing the parts of themselves they'd rather keep hidden. They might fear that once someone gets too close, they'll see all the things they've been trying to hide, their flaws, their weaknesses, their imperfections. The risk of rejection feels too great, the potential for hurt too overwhelming. But here's the thing about connection. It's built on risk. Without the willingness to take that leap of faith, to put yourself out there and trust that someone will catch you, there can be no deep relationship. And the longer the avoidant person holds back, the more they are deprived of the opportunity to experience the kind of love, support, and understanding that can only come from real intimacy. It's like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that the only way forward is to jump, but being too scared to do so. They look over the edge, paralyzed by the fear of falling, but what they don't realize is that there's a net below. There's always a chance for growth, for connection, for something greater than they've ever imagined, but only if they're willing to leap. The irony is that the more they resist connection, the more they push people away, the more they actually intensify their fear. Because without connection, they only become more isolated, more disconnected from the world and from themselves. The more they avoid the risk of being vulnerable, the more they suffer in silence, trapped in a cycle of loneliness and unspoken longing. They may tell themselves that they're fine on their own, but deep down they know something is missing. They're missing the raw, unfiltered experience of being known and loved by another person. They're missing the feeling of being accepted for who they are, flaws and all. What the avoidant mind fails to see is that the act of risking connection is also the act of healing. It's only by opening up, by risking the chance of being hurt, that true intimacy can be forged. Yes, vulnerability exposes you to the possibility of pain, but it also exposes you to the possibility of joy, of growth, of emotional depth that cannot be reached without taking that risk. In trying to avoid connection, the avoidant mind ultimately ends up isolating itself from the very thing it craves most. Love, understanding, and the kind of connection that brings meaning to life. True connection, real, deep, transformative connection, demands that you take a risk. It demands that you put yourself out there, even when it feels terrifying. Even when the fear of being hurt seems overwhelming, it demands that you let go of control and embrace the uncertainty that comes with allowing yourself to be seen, to be loved, to be vulnerable. And the beautiful thing about this risk is that it's not a one-time deal. Every time you open yourself up to connection, every time you let go of your need for control and allow yourself to feel, you strengthen your ability to connect with others on a deeper level. And as you do that, you'll find that the risk becomes less daunting and the rewards become immeasurable. The cost of emotional delay is irreversible moments. When you keep pushing your feelings aside, when you put off addressing the things that truly matter to you, something insidious starts to happen. Time moves forward, and the opportunity to act, to speak up, to show up becomes more and more fleeting. Each moment you choose to avoid your feelings, to hold back from confronting the emotional weight that's accumulating inside of you, is another moment you can never get back. It's a moment that slips through your fingers, never to be revisited or recovered. The longer you wait, the more those missed opportunities pile up, until one day you look back and realize that those moments of action, of connection, of real growth have already passed you by. This is the harsh reality of emotional delay. When you choose not to feel, when you choose not to engage, you don't just avoid discomfort, you avoid everything that could have come from confronting that discomfort. You miss the chance to grow stronger, to build deeper relationships, to learn more about yourself. Instead, you let the moment pass. You let your chance slip away. And when you realize the cost, it's often too late to turn back the clock. This delay doesn't just impact your relationships, it impacts your relationship with yourself. Every time you push away your feelings, you're telling yourself that you're not worthy of the kind of emotional engagement that comes with facing your true self. You tell yourself that you're not strong enough to handle the discomfort, that it's easier to simply bottle it up and move on, but in doing so, you rob yourself of the opportunity to grow emotionally, to face your fears, and to come out stronger on the other side. You end up creating a version of yourself that is disconnected, emotionally stunted, and unable to engage fully with the world around you. You might think that avoiding your feelings and delaying action is a form of self-preservation, that it's better to avoid pain than to confront it head on, but in reality, this is just a false sense of security. It's an illusion. What you're doing is trading real, meaningful connection for a temporary sense of safety, one that comes with the promise of avoiding discomfort. But this avoidance never leads to growth. It only leads to stagnation. The longer you avoid, the less capable you become of handling the very things you fear. You become trapped in a cycle of self-protection, and the very act of protecting yourself from emotional discomfort makes it harder to face the things that matter most. Emotional delay is like a quiet thief, one that sneaks up on you and steals from you without you even realizing it. Each time you decide to keep your feelings hidden, each time you tell yourself, "I'll deal with this later," you're stealing from your future self. You're denying yourself the chance to experience the full depth of life. And before you know it, those moments are gone. You can't go back and relive them. You can't undo the things you didn't say or the chances you didn't take. The opportunity to be present, to connect, to be open. Those moments don't come around again. They pass, and they leave a void behind them, a sense of regret, of what if. Regret is the cruelest consequence of emotional delay. When you realize that the opportunity to act, to speak, to connect has already passed, it's too late to change the outcome. You can't go back to that moment and redo it. You can't turn back time and make the choices you should have made. Instead, you're left with the emotional weight of unspoken words, unexpressed feelings, and missed opportunities. And that weight only gets heavier with time, pressing down on your chest until you can't ignore it any longer. The danger of emotional delay delay is not just the missed opportunities, but the way it distorts your perception of reality. The longer you hold back from feeling, from confronting your emotions, the more you begin to disconnect from what's real. You start to live in a kind of emotional limbo where you know something is wrong, but you don't know how to address it. You keep pushing forward, pretending that everything is fine, but inside, you're dying a little bit more each day. The more you delay, the more out of touch you become with your own emotions, and the more you lose sight of what truly matters. There's also a ripple effect of emotional delay. When you don't engage with your feelings, when you don't show up for the important moments in your life, those around you start to feel it too. They start to feel your absence, your emotional distance. They begin to wonder why you're not fully present, why you're not showing up for them in the way they need. Over time, they may begin to pull away from you, not because they don't care, but because they can't connect with someone who refuses to be emotionally available. And this only compounds the isolation, the disconnection. What was once a small temporary delay turns into a permanent rift. Each moment that you choose to avoid, to delay, to suppress your emotions is a moment you'll never get back. And when you finally realize the cost of that delay, when you finally come to terms with the fact that time has passed and those opportunities are gone, it can be heartbreaking. The misconnections, the unspoken words, the love that went unexpressed, they all become part of a past you can no longer change. In the end, emotional delay doesn't protect you. It doesn't keep you safe from pain. It just keeps you from fully living, from fully experiencing what life has to offer. The cost of delaying your emotions is not just the missed moments. It's the emotional toll that builds up over time. The regret, the lost chances, and the disconnection from the people and experiences that could have made your life richer, more fulfilling, and more meaningful. By delaying, you not only miss out on the things that could have shaped you, but you also rob yourself of the opportunity to grow, to heal, and to live the life you were truly meant to live. Healing starts when honesty overrides habit. For many people, emotional habits are like invisible chains that keep them trapped in patterns they don't fully understand. These habits are built over time, often beginning in childhood, where coping mechanisms were formed in response to difficult or painful experiences. The tendency to suppress, avoid, or ignore emotions becomes a habit, a way of dealing with pain or discomfort. But the truth is, these emotional habits, while protective at first, prevent you from moving forward. They keep you stuck in a cycle that repeats itself over and over again without allowing room for real change or healing. The moment that healing begins is when you finally have the courage to be honest with yourself. Honesty doesn't just mean telling the truth to others. It means acknowledging the truth about yourself. It means being honest about the emotional walls you've built, the things you're avoiding, and the ways in which you've been holding yourself back from fully experiencing life. This moment of honesty isn't easy. It requires vulnerability, and vulnerability is something the avoidant person fears most. But without this step, there can be no growth. You can't heal what you refuse to acknowledge, and you can't change what you're not willing to confront. When you're stuck in emotional habits, you're often unaware of the ways in which you're holding yourself back. You may tell yourself that you're fine or that things are under control, but deep down you know that something isn't right. You might be avoiding feelings, shutting down when things get too intense, or pushing people away out of fear of being hurt. These habits feel familiar, even comfortable, because they've been your coping mechanisms for years. But comfort and growth rarely coexist. Healing doesn't happen in your comfort zone. It happens when you push past those habits, when you challenge the way you've been thinking and acting for so long. Honesty is the key to breaking free from these emotional chains. The first step is acknowledging that you've been operating under the influence of these habits, often without even realizing it. You may not have realized how deeply ingrained these patterns have become in your life. You might have thought that you were simply protecting yourself from pain, but in reality, you were preventing yourself from fully engaging with your emotions and your relationships. It's like putting on a mask and hiding behind it, telling yourself that it's easier to keep up the facade than to face the messiness of what's underneath. But the truth is, that mask is only holding you back. It's keeping you from showing up as your authentic self. And until you take that mask off, you can't begin the real work of healing. When you choose honesty over habit, you make a conscious decision to face the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. You begin to admit to yourself that avoiding your emotions hasn't worked. It hasn't kept you safe. It's only kept you stuck. You begin to see that your patterns of avoidance, repression, and denial have only led you to more pain, more loneliness, and more confusion. The more you delay confronting your emotions, the more you pile on top of them, and eventually it becomes harder and harder to ignore the weight of what you've been carrying. At some point, the pressure becomes too much to bear, and you have no choice but to face it head on. This is when healing can finally begin, when you stop hiding from your emotions, when you allow yourself to feel what you've been pushing away for so long. It might feel overwhelming at first, and you may feel like you're drowning in a sea of emotion. But this is where growth happens. This is where you break free from the cycle of avoidance and denial. You start to see that your emotions are not your enemies. They are your teachers. They are the keys to understanding yourself more deeply, to connecting with others on a more authentic level, and to finding the courage to move forward. The journey of healing is not a linear one, and it's not easy. It requires patience, self-compassion, and the willingness to be uncomfortable. There will be moments when you want to retreat back into your old habits, when you want to push those emotions aside again and pretend that everything is fine. But the difference now is that you're aware of what you're doing, you're conscious of the patterns that have kept you stuck, and you have the power to choose a different path. Healing begins the moment you decide to break free from these old ways of coping and to embrace the vulnerability that comes with being truly honest with yourself. The process of healing is not about fixing yourself. It's about accepting yourself as you are and allowing the healing process to unfold naturally. It's about being kind to yourself as you navigate the difficult emotions and experiences that have shaped you. It's about recognizing that you don't have to be perfect to heal. You just have to be real. And being real means showing up even when it feels messy, even when it feels uncertain, and allowing yourself to feel whatever is coming up without judgment. Once you begin the process of honesty and emotional awareness, you'll notice a shift in how you approach your relationships and the world around you. You'll find that the more honest you are with yourself, the more authentic you become with others. You'll start to experience deeper, more meaningful connections because you're no longer hiding behind walls of defense and fear. You'll be able to communicate more openly, express your needs and desires more clearly, and build relationships based on true emotional intimacy rather than surface-level interactions. Healing is a journey, not a destination. It's a process that takes time, effort, and courage. But it all begins with one simple step: honesty. When you choose to be honest with yourself about your emotional habits, when you decide to face the truth rather than hide from it, you unlock the door to healing and growth. And once that door is open, there's no going back. You've taken the first step toward becoming the person you were always meant to be. The person who is no longer held back by fear, by old habits, or by emotional walls, but instead is free to experience life to its fullest. The power of personal growth lies in embracing the discomfort of change. For those who avoid their emotions, growth often feels like an insurmountable challenge. Change is scary, and for the avoidant person, it's often something they try to push away. They have created a world where emotional distance offers a sense of security and control. To them, staying within the confines of what feels familiar, regardless of how unhealthy it may be, feels like the safest option. But this kind of safety is an illusion. True safety and freedom come when we step outside our comfort zones, when we allow ourselves to grow and evolve. Change doesn't come easy. It requires stepping into discomfort, facing the unknown, and breaking free from the patterns that have kept us stuck. The avoidant person's first instinct is to avoid the discomfort, to withdraw into the safety of emotional detachment. However, this avoidance only leads to stagnation. It keeps them trapped in a cycle of unfulfilled potential, denying them the chance to discover who they could become if they dared to face their fears head on. Real growth doesn't happen when we stay within the comfort zone. It happens when we confront our weaknesses and vulnerabilities, when we push ourselves to do the very things that scare us the most. For the avoidant person, the idea of facing uncomfortable emotions is often overwhelming. They've spent years building walls to protect themselves from the pain of vulnerability, and the thought of tearing those walls down feels like an impossible task. But the truth is, those walls are the very things preventing them from growing. Each time they push their emotions aside, each time they retreat further into themselves, they deny themselves the opportunity to experience the richness of life's experiences. Emotional growth happens when we face our emotions, not when we avoid them. The more you allow yourself to feel, the more you begin to understand the complex nature of your emotions, and the more you are able to process and heal from them. Change requires self-awareness. It's only when we become aware of the patterns we've been living by that we can begin to alter them. For the avoidant person, self-awareness is a critical first step. They must first recognize the ways in which they've been avoiding emotional engagement and the impact that avoidance has had on their lives. This awareness isn't always easy to come by because avoidance is often a deeply ingrained habit. But once the avoidant person starts to recognize their emotional patterns, they can begin to make the conscious choice to embrace change even when it feels uncomfortable. Embracing change means being willing to sit with discomfort. It means allowing yourself to feel your emotions even when they make you feel vulnerable. This process may feel painful, but it's through the pain that healing happens. When you push through the discomfort, you begin to uncover deeper layers of yourself. You start to understand your needs, your desires, and your fears in ways that were previously hidden. Change forces you to confront the things you've been running from, and while it might feel like a struggle at first, it ultimately leads to personal growth and emotional freedom. The fear of vulnerability is often what holds people back from embracing change. But vulnerability is not a weakness, it's a strength. When you allow yourself to be vulnerable, you open yourself up to the possibility of deep connection and personal transformation. Vulnerability allows you to experience life more fully because it means you're no longer hiding from your true self. You stop pretending that everything is fine when it isn't, and you start to connect with others in a more genuine and meaningful way. True emotional growth is impossible without vulnerability, and this vulnerability often comes with the discomfort of change. But in that discomfort lies the power to transform your life. Personal growth is not about perfection. It's about progress. It's about the willingness to face your fears, to confront your weaknesses, and to make small changes that lead to big results. For the avoidant person, embracing change means learning to let go of the need for control, allowing yourself to be open to the process of growth, and taking one step at a time toward becoming the person you're meant to be. It's not a smooth or linear journey. There will be setbacks, moments of doubt, and times when you want to retreat back into your old habits. But with each step forward, you become stronger, more resilient, and more connected to your true self. The more you embrace the discomfort of change, the more you begin to see that the discomfort is not something to fear, it's something to embrace. Change is the catalyst for growth. It's the uncomfortable, messy, and often painful process of becoming who you're meant to be. When you allow yourself to sit with that discomfort, you begin to discover parts of yourself you never knew existed. In conclusion, true emotional growth and healing come from embracing discomfort, practicing patience, and being honest with ourselves about the need for change. It's through facing our fears, acknowledging our emotional patterns, and allowing ourselves the time to evolve that we unlock our full potential. So take your time, be kind to yourself, and trust the process, because real transformation is a journey, not a race. Thank you for listening, and may you continue to grow, heal, and embrace the challenges ahead. Goodbye, and take care.